Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to our show. We hope that you'll enjoy this episode in our continuing series brought to you in this television format. Bern, I've had a lot of people writing in and asking if you have a book. And I was wondering if you do have a book that's available that covers some of the information that we go over on the show.
Well, yes, I do, as a matter of fact, except that it's in my head and heart. You know, I've often wondered over the last few years whether I was being Socratic or just procrastinating about the book.
Yes.
The reason I say Socratic, of course, is that Socrates never wrote. When asked about that, he said that if you ask a book or a sculpture or a painting a question, you're always going to get the same answer. In other words, once you've written, there's a conclusion in that, and that there's a tendency for the writer to justify the conclusion. And he didn't want to do that, and certainly I haven't been prepared to do that, because most of the material that we talk about, as we have said before, is praxeological. In other words, it's occurring on the street, and things do change from decade to decade. Now, frankly, some of the material has chiseled itself in granite by now. And so I have been writing and hoped perhaps within a year or so to publish, or at least to be able to publish.
Mm-hmm.
I want to write it myself. See, a lot of speakers will get a ghostwriter or they'll collaborate with someone, and I find an incredible value in doing the writing because it helps you to be more articulate, to get in touch with the words, and it is quite challenging to go from the spoken word to the written word. I'm finding that is unusual. You would think it would just be a matter of copying the tapes, if you would, you know, just typing them up and publishing it.
Well, I would imagine you have to be much more precise in
I think
your
so.
language.
Yeah, I think so, because it's chiseled now.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And you want to make sure that something is really worthwhile.
So has there been a hesitancy on your part that perhaps the material would change or evolve as your study?
Well, like I say, I don't know which, whether I was just procrastinating or, you know, just waiting for it to, you know, to define itself. But I feel comfortable now, and I think we need to move forward with that. There's no question.
Well, tell me, Bern, as you're considering this book, have you come up with a title?
Yeah, if I don't get trouble from a publisher, it'll be Command Commission, The Command Commission. And the reason I've chosen that is that everything we do and have done in the seminar series and in our investigation, research and what have you, is to assist people in understanding that they're not in control. In other words, the control issue is more or less a trick of the Western mind. There is a Dr. Anderson, I believe her name is, from San Diego, a neurophilosopher surgeon, who says that the control concept is a trick of the Western mind, that indeed we're never in control. Now, we can influence.
We certainly don't feel in control a lot of times.
That's right, and yet we're trying to be.
Yes, there's always a striving to be in control, and typical phrases are, I'll get control of the situation, or when I get things under control, or... But now you're saying that's impossible?
Yeah, this is a bad counsel because I've heard it all my life, and I don't think a day goes by when I don't read or hear on television or read in the newspaper about getting in control. Control your time, control your attitude, control your behavior, control your money.
Control your children.
Yeah. And boy, I'll tell you, you show me someone who is control-oriented, and I'll show you someone who's frequently upset, aggravated, and agitated, and frustrated because they're constantly being reminded that they are not in control, that is.
And then you feel inadequate. You feel like there's something wrong with you.
Exactly.
That you're not in control.
Exactly. And so it's so unfair. And so, like I say, it's a matter of relinquishing control in order to be in command. Now, that seems just to be a semantical difference, but there's a dramatic difference between the two. For example, one of the illustrations that we make is you couldn't possibly say that a ship's captain was in control of his vessel if it's 300 or 400 miles off course because of a storm.
Right.
But he's still in command of the vessel.
Right.
You couldn't say that the captain was in control of the vessel if the engines had broken down and weren't running and the screws weren't turning. I mean, that ship is at the mercy of the whims of the wave and wind. There's no question. And so that's not being in control, but he's in command. Or if the crew sickens and is unable to function, he's still in command of the vessel, even though he certainly wouldn't be in control.
So he's constantly making decisions and evaluating what is the best thing to do based on external circumstances.
Exactly. If that captain doesn't throw up his hands in despair, relinquish all of his authority, just give up, that chances are that 9,999 times out of 10,000 that ship's going to reach port, and very probably on time.
Really?
Because when the authority is exercised, now granted, the captain has been prepared for that.
Yes.
Has been prepared for it. In other words, he's gone through school, he's studied rocks and shoals and tides and waves and navigation and astrology and astronomy, and he's got all that tied up, and so he has a pretty good idea of what to do, some leadership training, and so yes, indeed he is in command. Command's a powerful term. Now you couple that with commission. Now let's write this out for a second here. The command, commission. See, commission's a powerful word too. Typically, it's a frightening word. I know, for example, in the selling industry, someone says you're on commission, and someone goes straight commission, and to them that means no money.
Right.
Well, it's supposed to mean what? More money.
More money.
It means that you are commissioned to represent a product, and therefore you're participating in the profits that are appreciated. And so this is an authority. For example, the power is in the word in this sense, that if you want a portrait done,
yes,
or a sculpture, you can shop the marketplace and look at artists' work and say, oh, okay, I like this person's work, and so you go and commission them to do your painting. And when they unveil it, if you don't like it, what are you going to have to do anyway? You're going to have to pay them.
Right.
Because if it ever goes to court, you're going to lose because you commissioned the work being done.
So it's a commission goes beyond opportunity.
Oh, yes, my goodness. Yeah, it's authority. So authority. The command, commission. And where I'm coming from here is that it seems apparent, even obvious, that the Creator, or God if you would, circumstance, nature, some source, okay, has provided a huge amount of authority to every single person on the planet. Now, the authority comes from the fact that they're cognitive. We talked the other day about billions of brain cells,
right,
electrochemically connected, and that's attached to a body that can function. Certainly the mind can remember and can imagine and foresee possibilities in the future, can make choices and decisions, and then we can walk and run and see and hear and feel and smell and taste. Wow, what authority there is in that.
I agree with you, and it seems like often we are so accustomed to perhaps our authority, the command and the commission that we have, that we take it for granted and we don't realize.
I think it's because, a lot of it is it's just part of us and we don't think about it. But I think perhaps even worse, I think that we've had it taken from us and that we have surrendered it a lot of ourselves. For example, can you imagine the intention of a creator, if you would, at the point of conception? At that point of conception. What's the intention? It's like a flashing light toward excellence. That's the idea. In other words, almost unlimited capacities. And yet, even in the womb, the packaging starts. In other words,
really?
Oh, there's no question that mind begins to get molded, if you would, by perhaps a poor nutrition or good nutrition, by attitude, by the environment, by the stresses, for example, that the mother is exposed to, begins to package that fetus and the fetus's mind in such a way as to be tentative. And then, of course, the baby's born.
Really?
And then it really starts.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still do it or not, but they used to whack the kid when he first comes out, just to show him what life is going to be like. Yeah. But, typically, children, because of the admonition of society that says parents are responsible for their children, then children oftentimes have to be directed and molded in such a way as to conform to the parent's perception of the way things should be. And certainly that's not wrong, but it's not right for that mind, because in many ways that authority is diminished, even by a loving parent, who abrogates and confiscates that authority, okay, that mind has in order to keep it manageable.
And that is a difficult balance to keep, because you want children to be able to have the skills necessary to function in our society. Is there a way to do that and still...
Well, I think a lot of it is recognizing that either way it's going to take a lot of work. For example, if you mold and direct a child, that's going to take time, energy, and effort. Okay, and a lot of pain probably, because if you ground a kid for a month, then you got to be there too.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But at the same time, it has to be over here. If you guide and nurture, that's going to take time. Okay, in other words, for example, you can either mold and direct or guide and nurture. Do you feel there's a difference there?
There's certainly, yes.
Yeah, one
flavor.
is you're preparing that child to be free to go. You're not stifling the enthusiasm, the excitement, the exuberance, the curiosity. No, you're letting that mind just flourish. And it's not easy. I mean, it can keep you pretty busy. It's really fascinating. You take children who are kind of left to run and go and only managed in the point that they don't impose upon someone else's life, but just let them go. For example, I have grandchildren who have been kind of let go. We let them kind of take their chances. These kids weren't told not to talk to strangers. You know what I mean? And so therefore, I mean, they're real curious and they're open and they'll go up to anybody, but they have been coached on how to be discerning, you know, and if someone touches them or makes a move, that they know how to move and how to get away and this kind of thing. So it's a different kind of coaching that's going on, but we've retained their outwardness, okay, and their exuberance. And granted, it makes for a difficult child from some perspective, but I'll tell you, around 8 or 9, they begin to settle in, and it makes them pretty powerful young people. For example, I have a granddaughter who, Marley, I don't know if I've told you about this or not, but when she was 6 years old, there was a teacher who called her a bad girl. And Marley braced herself and she says, "No, I'm not. You have no right to call me that. You know, I'm not a bad girl. I think I made a mistake there and I misbehaved, but I'm not a bad girl, and I wish you would never call me that again." You see, that kind of authority doesn't exist in most children. They succumb and they accommodate, and so they take on bad girl as part of their persona if they're not careful.
That's who they are, not what they've done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so she took a position, and we were very proud of her. The teacher became upset, called her mother, my daughter, and then they had to deal with her. You know, I mean, because Rochelle indeed was proud of Marley for taking that position, to screen out what people were saying, to say, no, this is who I really am. But most people don't have that authority. And it's certainly diminished. Then, of course, when we get to be about 6 years old, we begin to participate in that with the I can'ts and you know, this kind of thing.
I can't do that.
At 12 years old, it's another mental shift where the child begins to want to disappear because they don't know who they are, and that's called conformity. You know, all the things that they do as teenagers and what have you. I mean, they're not being rebellious, they're joining their group and conforming in order to hide out until they find out who they are. You and I both know that a lot of those children emerge later, okay, as fine citizens, if you just kind of don't get too severe with them. I mean, they're just trying to find out who they are. And then, of course, it goes on through our life. See, what happens? In the beginning, this authority is abrogated and confiscated by parents, peers, teachers, and what have you. Then at a certain age, we begin to participate by delegating our authority. We delegate, we relegate, we negotiate, we sublimate, and we subjugate our own authority. And we end up a shell of what we were intended to be.
Now, Bern, that's quite a list of words.
Yeah, okay. Abrogated and confiscated means that someone imposes upon you, or their will upon you, in order to get you to do what you want, or they take it away by confining you, you know what I mean, defining who you are and how you work. That's right. Then at a certain age, we begin to delegate. In other words, we'll take a piece of our authority and give it away on purpose, so as to share that out. Relegate, setting it aside, not using it right now.
Now, why do we do that? I can understand, especially when we're young, other people denying us our authority, taking it away from us. And they have power over us. They're bigger, they're stronger, we trust them. But why would we delegate or relegate or negotiate our power away?
Okay, it's part of the setup. In other words, we're still honoring our source, which in many cases is our parents. They have established certain criteria, and we continue to honor that. For example, negotiate. One of the things that I tend to mention, because of where I'm coming from, is that we tend at a certain point to negotiate a big chunk of our life away in exchange for a paycheck.
Yes.
As we negotiate
That's
a deal,
true, definitely.
yeah, where we got 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year in exchange for a paycheck, where we're prepared to help someone else reach their goals. They don't have a whole lot of concern about our goals. They're going to pay us as little as they can in order to keep our attention.
But we
That's
have
just
to
the way it
eat.
is.
We
Well,
have to have a roof over our heads. We have
I know,
to provide
but
for
see,
our
we've been
families.
conditioned by society to negotiate for a job rather than be entrepreneurial. See, the ones who are really making it out here, like people say, I wonder how he makes all that money. How come he drives that big car? He hasn't negotiated away his time and his talent. He's using it for his own purposes by making a contribution to the community.
I understand.
Yeah, in other words, you stay free. Sublimate, I mean, thank goodness we sublimate our authority, because what that really means is to diminish the authority in order to be socially appropriate. For example, I'm not especially fond of standing in long lines.
Right.
Like if I want to go to a good movie or a theater or something.
Well, no one likes to stand in line, but we certainly do it.
But I'll go there and I'll see that line. I'm thinking, oh boy, I got 3 choices to make. I can either leave and come back later, or I can get in the line and hope to strike up a conversation or read a book or something, or I have another choice. I have the authority for another choice, and what's that?
To cut in?
Yeah, to time it just right and go right to the head of the line. It is so easy to do, Gina. I've done it enough times in my experimenting to know that it can be done. Now, I'm not going to convey the techniques here on the air because I would be accused of creating chaos out here, you know. But I've never been ostracized. I've never had anyone touch me. I've never had anyone say anything directly to me whenever I've cut a line. But I've done it only to experiment, to test myself and to the experience, but I don't do that normally. That's called sublimating. And those normally I either leave or I stand at the end of the line like everybody else. But that's sublimation. Sublimating is staying within the traffic law, for example.
Right.
I mean, sitting at a red light when there's no traffic is a real sublimation of our authority and our good judgment. I think that's the most ludicrous thing we can do when you think about it.
Well, sure as you don't, there'll be someone waiting for you.
As soon as you may go through
That's right. Those sirens will come on.
And then we subjugate our authority in order to avoid risk. And I don't know how many times in my life I've heard people say, oh, I can't do that. Particularly having been in sales and recruiting for sales, and people say, oh, I couldn't do that. You know, I mean, they just deny themselves the possibility. Now, by the time they've done all of this, what's happened? Like I say, they're a shell of what they otherwise might be. And so we end up, if we're not careful, you know, kind of peeking out of the world, grasping our way through life. Okay? We're grasping as opposed to having a clear way through life.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of fear tied up with all of these actions or non-actions.
On this grasping, can you see what I'm saying here? I mean, just semantically, you can see which one might be better. To grasp your way through life or have a clear pathway.
Right.
Yeah. Over here, grasping, of course, is an acronym. And what that stands for is that at some level or another, having gone through this diminishment, we end up grudgingly reacting to almost everything that happens to us. As you watch it out here, I mean, you get accustomed to this and you'll see it going on all the time. And then we attack the source of discomfort. As we fuss and stew over it, usually making generalizations, and then we pass on the pain the first chance we get.
Yes.
For example, I have a classic case I talk about in seminar. This delightful woman. I was working in an office about 4 years ago, and we were doing a promotion, and they were officing me there, and it was a nice courtesy. And I got to know the whole staff and enjoyed them all, and we had a good rapport going. And one day, and I'm going to call her Charlene for the sake of argument. Charlene, who was a delightful person and a good hand, reliable and what have you, left for lunch. And in this particular office, they were quite generous. They gave an hour for lunch. And I think a lot of businesses only give you a half hour.
Right.
But she had an hour for lunch and was very prompt usually. But this particular day, she didn't return in an hour or an hour and 15 minutes. Pretty soon she was a half hour late, and people began to be concerned because this wasn't like her. And then it got to be 45 minutes, and then there was some agitation. You know what I mean? How we go through these different moods?
Yes.
Yeah, and nearly 2 hours, Charlene comes storming into the office. I mean, she obviously was upset. She was throwing off a lot of energy, a lot of heat, had been crying, exuding a lot of energy, and of course everybody crowded around. What's wrong, Charlene? And this was the story she told. She was at a supermarket over here and had done some grocery shopping and was going to scoot home, and get some lunch. There was a street called Arden Way along here, and this is Eastern. Okay, and right there, there's a grocery store and all the parking lot, and there was an entranceway into the parking lot here, and an entrance and exit over here.
Right.
And there was an island, kind of right along in here, okay, right up to this point. And she had gotten her groceries, and she was parked right here with the intention of turning right. And there was a lady over here that she saw in a car. Now she looked left, couldn't move because there was traffic. Looked right, saw the lady looking right at her. She looked left to check the traffic, no room. Looked right, saw the lady looking right at her. She looked left, okay, there was room, so she made her move, okay? And she came out this way, and at that same time, guess what? This lady came out this way.
Yes.
And there was a very near miss, some screeching brakes and what have you. And in that moment, Charlene took that serious. In other words, that was an affront to her, and she went into what we've called survival and behaved inappropriately. In other words, no one was ever going to do that again, evidently, because she did a U-turn right here over the island.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, she went over the island and chased this other lady down Arden Way, tooting her horn and waving to her, forgetting to use her whole hand. You know what I mean? Really making a scene. There was a stoplight here, and the lady stopped. We don't know if she had seen Charlene before, but she sure did now, because Charlene pulled up right beside her. And this is Charlene's story, by the way. Got out of the car and was approaching this lady. Well, then she went into a fear mode, and instead of fighting like Charlene was in, she fled.
She just took off.
She did. Now, you can turn right on red in California.
Yes.
But you're supposed to wait for the traffic. You know what I mean? And in her panic, she just made her move, okay? And, of course, all these other people around here were upset. They went into survival, tooting horn, yelling, what have you. Charlene ran back to her car and made this turn also.
Across
the
lane.
Across the lane, and was chasing this lady all through this neighborhood, or trying to find her. She'd lost her, say. And here it was all this time, and now she was back at the office.
Oh, my goodness, for almost an hour.
Yeah, well, probably an hour and a half. She'd been going through all this. I mean, and this was totally out of character for her. This is what I'm talking about. You do this long enough, delegate enough authority, and there's a little piece of you that will be grudgingly reacting and attacking, and then stewing. What was she stewing about? When we get into that state, we make generalizations. And she was really aggravated about women drivers.
Oh, my goodness.
And there she was one. See?
There she was one.
Yeah, so it gets irrational. See? But she was stewing about it. And finally, I mean, we can only tisk so long, and finally people began to go back to their respective cubbyholes.
And she was still upset.
Oh, yeah, she was still in a
Oh, my
rock.
goodness.
The receptionist said, Charlene, I do have some messages for you that people called while you were gone. She grabbed them from the receptionist's hand, saying, well, I hope you got these right, because you always mix up the numbers and I can never get back with my customers. And she stormed off to her cubicle. Now, that's not real. And so where do you think the receptionist went? She grudgingly reacted. She was a little less appropriate all through the rest of the day with people calling in and other people in the office. Okay, she was stewing about that inappropriateness, and I'm sure maybe went home and groused her kid about something. You know what I mean? Somebody probably ended up kicking a dog.
We certainly have a tendency to do that.
Oh, yeah, as it goes on. Now, at some level or another, it's not as blatant as this, but it's subtle. Now, of course, traffic brings that out in us because it is a survival state.
It's very much fear-oriented.
Sure. Yeah,
yes.
There's a lot of fear out there, and there justly should be.
I'm sure the adrenaline was really pounding for a while, too.
What's the alternative? If Charlene had been clear, okay, this would never have occurred. Okay. For example, what this means is for us to consciously, and conscientiously Because that's the utilization of the two, I'm going to go off the board here, but consciously and conscientiously, that's using the two better parts of our trichotomous mind. All right? Look and really see. Listen and really hear. Okay, if we're conscious and conscientious, we can do that. Look and really see, listen and really hear. Evaluate what's really taking place, and empathize, which is a love word, whenever we can. Empathize.
Instead of automatically assuming that all women drivers are creeps.
Exactly. And then to accept the occurrence, that was acknowledge and acknowledge it. Okay, this is what really happened. Okay, and then down here we can what? Instead of doing this, instead of reacting, we can respond. You got it. Okay.
Yes.
Now the interesting thing: what takes the most time?
Well, I'd imagine they would take the same time.
Perhaps, except she spent an hour and a half doing all this.
Well, you can certainly get on with your life much faster.
Yes, you can get on with your life, exactly. Right. And see, and we can do this if we can get clear. Now, what I mean by that, it's kind of like years ago, I'd say maybe 18 to 20 years ago, I had a vision. I don't mean some kind of thing, but you know what I mean? It occurred to me of the possibility of a horizonless field. Imagine a horizonless field. It just kept going. Yeah. And thousands upon thousands of people moving through that field, pushing wheelbarrows. Okay? And the wheelbarrow had a wheel on it. Okay? And those wheelbarrows were loaded with stuff. Just loaded, okay? And they were up to their ankles, their shins, in some cases their knees, trying to push those wheelbarrows because the wheelbarrows were filled with hurt and pain and aggravation and upset and their past. And what I wanted to be able to do is to empty those wheelbarrows and re-perceive that information and stuff it into the muck that they were in. It would cause them to be, stifled, and to put them on a firm footing without the wheelbarrow, okay? And in order to do that, we have to recapture our authority. And I have 4 steps to do that, and it appears as what we're going to have to do is to wait until next week to continue with this.
Wonderful.
But we got some exciting stuff coming up, and I hope that everybody will make note that we're on soon. So check your cable schedules and be with us next week when we continue with the Command Commission. Gina, I want people to write. I want them to call. And by the way, our number is 1-800-661-3490. And my name is Byrne. And my last name is?
Moses.
And you're Gina Fitt. And I appreciate you.
Thank you, Byrne.